When Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin was first announced, it was met with a lot of confusion. It was meant to be a reimagining of Final Fantasy I, but the characters and dialogue were a little bit, dare I say, cringe. However, after players got to try out the beta and a few more trailers dropped, sentiment really started to turn around for this game. How did it translate into the final product? Well, let's dive on in. Let's get this out of the way first. Unless you plan on enjoying the story ironically, Stranger of Paradise is a far cry from what you'd expect from a Final Fantasy game. Yes, it has Final Fantasy in the title, and it even tries to tug on your nostalgia with some iconic imagery, but overall the game is just as campy as it looked in the trailers. The party mentions chaos a lot.
My mission is to kill chaos. When are we gonna fight chaos?
Here we are, ready and willing to take chaos down for you.
It's fairly light on characterizations, and honestly the story is just there to push you from one level to the next. I got some laughs, probably unintentionally so, from the story, and it was kind of fun to see the story bits in between battles, and I kind of was interested to see where it went. And even though the story wasn't the reason I was playing this game, I'm kind of okay with that because the combat was so good. Now, Stranger of Paradise is a linear, action-heavy RPG. A lot of people are calling it a Souls-like, but I'm not going to compare it to that just because it's challenging. You won't drop your experience if you die like in Dark Souls, and really there aren't experience points at all, but I'll touch on that a little bit later. You do, however, need to stay on your toes with dodging, blocking, absorbing attacks, and more. Now, the combat system has your setup that you would expect from an action game. You have your basic attack, your blocks, your dodges, a special attack that requires MP, and you can refill that MP by doing normal attacks or absorbing hits at the right moment, almost like parrying in a way. Now, when you absorb certain attacks, you can actually use them back on the enemy, which is really cool. It's almost like a blue mage in a way. Now, you can probably get through the main levels and the minor enemies with ease, but you don't want to play mindlessly. You have to be pretty thoughtful and see what the enemy's doing, know when to block, and know when to absorb attacks. Now, you and the enemies have a stagger meter. Every time you block, your stagger meter will deplete slowly, and if it depletes all the way, you'll be vulnerable for a set amount of time. And it's basically the same for the enemies, but instead of being vulnerable, you can just straight up do a finishing attack. It kind of reminds me of the glory kills from Doom, where you just grab an enemy, get those red crystals, and you just smash them to bits. It's really satisfying. Now, to me, the combat truly shines in boss battles. They're much longer, require you to pay attention, and put all your skills that you've learned to use. Again, you can't mash mindlessly. You'll need to find windows to get in attacks, know when to block, know when to absorb attacks, and know when to just let your team deal some damage and sit back and let them do their thing. When you really learn all the systems and you're in a nice flow of combat, it just feels so satisfying. Dodging, blocking, absorbing attacks, smashing enemies, getting experience, getting more loot, it all is just a really nice flow. And for these boss battles, or really anytime you die, restarting is really quick and you won't lose a lot of progress, so it really isn't that frustrating. Now, for those of you like me that are coming off of Elden Ring, you'll probably give this game a little bit of slack, or maybe even enjoy it more than you would have if you didn't play Elden Ring. I say that because it's much more linear and straightforward than Elden Ring. It's way less complicated. It's really easy to understand the systems and what you need to do next. Yet, the combat is really deep and satisfying. Now, the reviews were a little bit lower than I expected. I actually was expecting the reviews to be kinder to the game because maybe they were just coming off of Elden Ring and it had a lot of those same elements, but it was a little bit easier. But nonetheless, I think the story is really what dropped the scores. Overall, the combat system is just stellar, and in my opinion, the main reason you'll want to play this game. Now, what kept me hooked and what I loved is the job system. Overall, there are 27 jobs in total, and you can have 2 equipped at any given time that you can swap between on the fly. Now, when you begin the game, you start off with basic classes like a swordsman, a mage, and a pugilist. Eventually, you can unlock much cooler jobs like the Ronin, the Dark Knight, Black Mage, and much more. I just loved going down the skill trees, learning these different abilities, and unlocking new classes. And what's cool is the skill trees aren't that big, so getting to the next class is never that far off. And I actually really like this because it incentivized you to try all these different classes and see which ones you liked most. Now, to my surprise, classes didn't exactly play how I thought they would. I just thought with a mage you'd be sitting back firing fireballs, but instead you have a mace and a shield and you do a lot of melee attacks. In fact, every class is pretty melee focused, but pulls elements from classes that you would expect. Like I said, firing fireballs if you're a black mage, or healing if you're a white mage. Even the quote-unquote slow classes are really fast. This isn't Dark Souls where you'll be slow swinging these giant weapons, they're all fast here. And again, it was just really addictive unlocking all these different classes to see what they all did. Yes, I said addictive, not addicting. You English teachers in the comments happy? Just for the record, both are acceptable, by the way. Now, unfortunately, you can only control Jack in single player, however, you can swap to the other characters in multiplayer. You only have minor control of their classes as they're pretty locked in, but you can mix and match and do different things with the classes that you would expect like with any other class. Now, I haven't tested multiplayer, so I can't comment on how stable it is or how fun it is, but it seems like a really cool aspect, and that's where you can play as the other characters. And one last thing I want to mention is the gear system. You're constantly getting new gear in this game, like with almost every enemy. And what's cool is it changes your characters visually, so it's always really fun to swap out pieces to see how you look. Although I will have to say that eventually the gear got exhausting. You're gonna accumulate a giant list of gear, but thankfully you can destroy them to make parts to upgrade your gear if you want to. Eventually I kind of just let the game pick the best gear for me, even if it looks stupid, but as the game goes on and I unlock even more classes, I expect that I'll probably choose my gear again later. As far as the looks go, it's just fine. It's not gonna blow you away, but it doesn't look super bad like a PS3 game, as some people have said. I really think people forgot what a PS3 game even looks like. Now, the abilities and spell effects all look really cool, and honestly, that's what matters most, as you'll be in combat a lot in this game. Overall, there is some great enemy designs and some cool redesigns of faithful characters like the Tonberry, the Fireball, and much more. Now, I played this on PlayStation 5 and it ran at a rock solid 60 frames per second and maybe even higher. I don't really know how to tell just with my eye just how high the frame rate is. If you want a full breakdown, Digital Foundry probably has you covered. Now, as for the music, you would expect something great, especially because it's Koei Tecmo and they have the Dynasty Warriors games, which always have rockin' soundtracks, and it's Final Fantasy, also known for its music, but here it's just forgettable. I literally can't remember a single tune. There were some songs to the Final Fantasy theme, but that's pretty much it. So if you're looking for great music here, you're probably not gonna find it. So far, I've really enjoyed my time with Stranger of Paradise. The story is dumb in a really fun way, the combat is stellar, and the job system is so deep and addictive. I wasn't sure if I would like this game, but so far I'm having a total blast, and I'm weirdly intrigued to see where the story goes leading up to the end. Now, if you want to hear my thoughts on another challenging action RPG that came out recently, definitely click here to see my review for Elden Ring. I've put in over 100 hours, this game did a lot of crazy stuff, and you're going to want to hear my thoughts on it. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.